December 1941. Melbourne, one of the brightest cities in the Southern Hemisphere. Then Japan bombs Pearl Harbor. Within 24 hours, the lights go out. Not gradually, not after committees and studies, overnight. While America spent months debating how to convert factories, Australia was already making bullets. This is the story of 3 decisions that happened faster than a Spitfire sortie, and how a nation of 7 million people mobilized for total war before the world's greatest industrial power could even finish the paperwork. September 1939. Australia declares war on Germany the same day as Britain. But for 2 years, it's a distant conflict. The real fighting is in North Africa, Greece, the Middle East. Australian factories keep making cars. Wool still goes to Britain. Life is rationed, sure. Petrol coupons start in 1940, but the economy is humming along at what historians politely call limited war footing. Then, December 7th, 1941. Everything changes. Pearl Harbor, Malaya, Singapore under siege. Japan isn't just in the war, Japan is next door. Prime Minister John Curtin realizes Australia is now fighting a 2-front war, defending Britain's empire abroad and stopping an invasion at home. The industrial problem. Australia's entire manufacturing base is built for peacetime. General Motors Holden makes car bodies. Small workshops make farm equipment. The munitions industry that does exist is tiny, scattered, undertooled. And the United States, the only power that can help, is still figuring out its own production mess. So Curtin's government does something radical. It doesn't wait for consensus. It doesn't negotiate with industry. It doesn't commission a feasibility study. It just acts. Let's start with the most literal 24-hour transformation. Melbourne, December 1941. A city that could be seen from 50 miles out to sea. Neon signs, thousands of street lamps. Trams lit up like Christmas every night. In the days immediately following Pearl Harbor, the Curtin cabinet makes a decision. Coastal cities are now potential bombing targets. The lights have to go out. No debate, no city council consultations, just an order. By mid-December, some reports suggest within days of the cabinet decision, Melbourne is unrecognizable. Street lighting, reduced to 1 lamp in every 4, shaded to throw just 40 feet of light. Electric trains, 2/3 of each carriage darkened. Tram headlights, hooded, shop windows, covered at dusk. Closing time moved to 6 p.m., no exceptions. The Argus newspaper reported on December 13th, 1941. Streets usually crowded with Friday night shoppers showed no neon signs, no brilliant illumination of Christmas goods. This wasn't a blackout like London's, it was a brownout, a dimming rather than total darkness. But the speed, that was pure Australian pragmatism. Compare that to the United States. After Pearl Harbor, American coastal cities faced the same threat. German U-boats were sinking ships silhouetted against the bright lights of New York, Miami, and Boston. But blackout regulations in the US took months to fully implement. Why? Because America's system required coordination across states, municipalities, and federal agencies. City councils had to vote. Businesses lobbied for exemptions. The Office of Civilian Defense issued recommendations, not orders. New York didn't enforce a full dim-out until April 1942, 4 months after Pearl Harbor. Miami? Not until May. Australia's advantage wasn't democracy versus dictatorship. Both were democracies. It was size and command structure. A cabinet decision in Canberra could ripple through Australia's state governments in hours. In America, a federal suggestion could take months to become a city ordinance. Dimming lights is one thing, rewiring an entire economy. That's where Australia's speed became terrifying. January 1942. The Curtin government creates the Manpower Directorate, not a planning body.
That every human being in this country is now, whether he or she likes it, at the service of the government to work in the defence of Australia.
Not an advisory committee, a directorate, with the power to tell any Australian adult where they would work and when. In effect, Manpower imposed industrial conscription. Every adult Australian received an identity card, The Director General of Manpower could exempt anyone from military service or revoke that exemption, declare industries protected and freeze their workforce, require permits for any job change, raid hotels and racetracks to round up men avoiding war work. This wasn't theory. This was immediate. By March 1942, just 2 months after the Directorate's creation, a new schedule of reserved occupations replaced the old list. If your factory made ammunition, you couldn't quit to take a higher-paying job elsewhere. If you were a skilled machinist, the government could order you to a munitions plant. The results were staggering. In early 1942, Australia had fewer than 30,000 workers in munitions. By late 1943, over 120,000, a four-fold increase. Small arms factory Lithgow went from peacetime production to churning out rifles, Bren guns and ammunition at a rate that shocked even British planners. GM Holden's car plants at Fisherman's Bend and Woodville didn't just convert, they were annexed. One day assembling sedans. Within weeks machining aircraft components, wings for Beauforts, engine mounts for Wirraways, fuselage sections for Mosquitoes. Now let's talk about the United States. America's industrial mobilization was, ultimately, the most successful in history. By 1944, US factories were producing more planes, tanks and ships than the rest of the world combined. But the speed to get there, that was a different story. The War Production Board, America's equivalent to Australia's Manpower Directorate, wasn't established until January 1942, same as Australia's. But its chairman, Donald Nelson, didn't have the power to compel conversion. He had to negotiate. Take Detroit. In early 1942, FDR orders a total halt to civilian car production. The big three, Ford, GM, Chrysler, agree in principle. But the actual conversion required contract cancellations with suppliers, legal review, weeks. Retooling entire assembly lines, engineering, months. Negotiating cost-plus contracts with the Army and Navy, bureaucracy, months. Securing WPB priority ratings for steel and aluminum, paperwork, more months. Ford's Willow Run plant, eventually the world's largest bomber factory, didn't produce its first B-24 Liberator until September 1942. That's 9 months from the order to first plane. Australia's GM Holden was making aircraft components within weeks. Why? The Annex Scheme. Instead of building giant new factories, Australia converted small workshops, metalworking shops that made farm plows now stamped shell casings. University labs became fuse assembly lines. It wasn't efficient at scale, but it was fast. The US approach was the opposite. Massive, purpose-built facilities. More output eventually, but much slower to start. And there's a second reason. Legal compulsion. Australia's national security regulations gave the government near dictatorial economic power. It could commandeer factories without compensation lawsuits. It could freeze wages and prices by gazette notice, enforceable the next day. The US could request, Australia could order. February 19, 1942. Darwin. 242 Japanese aircraft. More bombs dropped on Darwin in this single raid than on Pearl Harbor. 243 dead. 8 ships sunk. The town, for all practical purposes, destroyed. May 31st, 1942. Sydney Harbour. 3 Japanese midget submarines penetrate the harbour defences. 1 torpedoes the HMAS Kutabul. 21 sailors killed. The war wasn't theoretical, it was here. And that proximity created political oxygen for extreme measures. When Curtin's cabinet issued overnight orders, no one argued. When the Manpower Directorate froze wages, unions grumbled but complied. When shops were forced to close at 6 p.m., Melburnians just did it. Because Japanese reconnaissance planes had been spotted off the coast, because everyone knew someone in the 8th Division captured at Singapore, because the threat was existential. America had a luxury Australia didn't: distance. Yes, Pearl Harbor was devastating. Yes, Japanese submarines shelled the California coast. But the homeland was never truly threatened. That meant American policymakers could afford to debate, to negotiate, to let industry adapt at its own pace, within limits. Australia couldn't. Every day without a functioning war economy was a day the Japanese got closer. So when historians ask, how did Australia move so fast? The answer is partly institutional, with centralized government, partly economic, with smaller scale, but mostly psychological. Fear is a hell of a motivator. Now here's the twist. Australia's speed advantage was temporary. By 1943, American production was a tsunami. In 1944 alone, the United States produced 96,000 aircraft. Australia's total war production, about 5,000. 17,000 tanks. Australia, 66 Sentinel tanks before the program was cancelled. 2,400 naval vessels. The US wasn't just outproducing Australia, it was outproducing everyone combined. So if America ultimately won the production war, why does Australia's early speed matter? Two reasons. First, 1942 was the critical year. When Australian troops were holding the Kokoda track in New Guinea, they were using Australian-made ammunition, Australian-made rifles, Australian-made grenades. Because American Lend-Lease, while generous, took time to arrive. Ships were being sunk, priorities shifted, supply chains were chaos. Australia's rapid mobilization meant its troops had something to fight with while American production ramped up. Second, complementarity. By late 1943, the relationship wasn't Australia versus US. It was Australia with US. Australian factories made specialized components, small arms, radar equipment, optical instruments. American factories made the heavy stuff, bombers, carriers, trucks. It was a division of labor. Australia sprinted out of the gate. America built the marathon infrastructure. And together they supplied MacArthur's Southwest Pacific campaign. So what's the lesson? In war, speed and scale are both essential, but they operate on different timelines. Australia's advantage was decision-making velocity. Small government, existential threat, legal compulsion, and a population willing to accept overnight transformation. America's advantage was industrial depth. Once the machine started moving, it was unstoppable. Australia ordered a brownout and had it enforced by morning. America took months to dim coastal cities, but eventually built 300,000 aircraft. Neither approach was better. They were suited to context. And that's the real story here. Australia didn't beat America. Australia moved first. America moved bigger. And together, they won. If your grandparents or relatives worked in a munitions factory in 1942, or dimmed their lights every night, or got pulled into a war job they never asked for, they were part of this. The generation that didn't wait for permission. They just did it. So here's the question for you. In a crisis, what matters more? Instant decisions or unstoppable throughput? Drop your answer in the comments. And if your family has stories from Australia's home front, I want to hear them. That's it for today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on our next story. Until next time.